I sent one transcript of actually various talks that I gave in various places, and I had a long list of people to thank, and even then I probably forgot to thank some people. So many people have played a role in my life, like in every life really, positively, that it is impossible to thank them all in writing, although I remember them all. But especially in music, I think it is important to remember your teachers, who may not all be alive either. In fact, many of my teachers are no longer in this world. But since a child, I was very fortunate in learning from some very gifted people who were not only technically very good, but also spiritually very advanced, starting with my mother and my grandmother. So I always feel very humble when I have to talk about music. Especially what I want to do today is to speak more directly about the connections between spirituality and music in Tagore. I should also mention that if you are interested in this topic of spirituality more, I will be giving another seminar on the 18th of October, on a Thursday I think. We have a series on religion and violence, and my talk, I think the title is Spirituality Contra Fetishism. Subtitle is Values and Violence. So that will be a different take, but I'm sure the name of Tagore and other people who have influenced me very deeply, not just musically but also spiritually, will surface. I think I asked Saraji about this book, Amartya Sen. How many of you have heard his name? He is professionally now I am an economist. I used to be other things before, as Saraji told you. And Amartya Sen is a Nobel Prize winning economist. He went to the same school that was founded by Tagore, which later became a university and still is a university. I was very fortunate to give another concert there about now it's about 4 years ago. And it's a very beautiful campus, although what was a village at one time during Tagore's lifetime has now grown into more than a small town with the traffic jams and other annoyances. But still, it has that aspect that Tagore wanted to and created, namely an open-air setting for art and music. And I was very happy to perform in the open space there. And I think that's the way music really should be. But Sen was lucky. His grandfather was a colleague of Tagore and taught in Shanti Niketan, which is literally translated the home of peace. Tagore was a genuinely peace-loving person and really worked to create beauty and peace. Well, in a way you can say that peace is beautiful and beauty is peace. We just use two words, but they connect with the same set of things. And although Tagore, like me, Sen, like me, is an economist, he has been deeply influenced by Tagore and the environment of that place. So when he was asked to write something on the 50th anniversary of Indian independence, you may know that India was declared independent from the English in 1947. So that part actually America and India have in common. Both used to be British colonies and both fought for their freedom and finally succeeded in wresting free from colonialism. So 1997 was the 50th anniversary, and this is when he wrote this, and maybe it's worthwhile to read a few paragraphs from there to give you an introduction and bring it up to date, because Sen, as is typical of him, also poses very thoughtfully some questions. This particular essay is called Tagore and his India. And I quote, Rabindranath Tagore, who died in 1941 at the age of 80, is a towering figure in the millennium-old literature of Bengal. Anyone who becomes familiar with this large and flourishing tradition will be impressed by the power of Tagore's presence in Bangladesh and in India. His poetry, as well as his novels, short stories, and essays, are very widely read, and the songs he composed reverberate around the eastern part of India and throughout Bangladesh. In contrast, in the rest of the world, especially in Europe and America, the excitement that Tagore's writings created in the early years of the 20th century has largely vanished. The enthusiasm with which his work was once greeted was quite remarkable. Gitanjali, a selection of his poetry for which he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1913, was published in English translation in London in March of that year and had been reprinted 10 times by November, when the award was announced. But he is not much read now in the West, and already by 1937, Graham Greene was able to say, "As for Rabindranath Tagore, I cannot believe that anyone but Mr. Yeats can still take his poems very seriously." Yeats was a great Irish poet who won the Nobel Prize as well. So here is the problem. The contrast between Tagore's commanding presence in Bengali literature and culture and his near-total eclipse in the rest of the world is perhaps less interesting than the distinction between the view of Tagore as a deeply relevant and many-sided contemporary thinker in Bangladesh and India, and his image in the West as a repetitive and remote spiritualist. Graham Greene had, in fact, gone on to explain that he associated Tagore with what Chesterton calls the bright, pebbly eyes of the theosophists. Certainly, an air of mysticism played some part in the selling of Rabindranath Tagore to the West by Yeats, Pound, and his other early champions. But the problem that he poses is what really can make Tagore come alive, as it were, in the way that he is alive in India and Bangladesh and some other parts of the world. And I think part of the problem is that spirituality has become a cliche. And whenever something becomes a cliche, it really loses that aliveness, that stamp of being born from genuine experience in someone's soul. And artistic expression, of course, demands more than just experience. It demands something of a concrete form, and it is difficult to translate from one language to another. As poetry is very difficult, probably the most difficult thing to translate. Music, for those who actually have good musical intuition and some training, is easier, I would say. Although there too, for vocal music, there is always the problem of translating the lyrics, and that is very challenging, as I know, or as anyone who has tried to translate anything in music. So I think the best thing to do is to say a few words about Tagore, the man, and the spirit of Tagore, and what came from him or from his spirit. He was born in 1861, as Tagore, as Sen mentions. He died in 1941. That's a long life of 80 years, during most of which he actually was creative. He started writing probably when he was almost a child, when he was 8 or 9 years old. His first published stuff that we can find is from the time he was 12 years old. So he was very precocious. And he grew, I think. That is the most amazing thing that one finds. And you can compare him with other artists, for example, Beethoven in the West, who grew continuously, of course, amidst much spiritual suffering and hardship. Tagore's life was, from the outside, not full of economic hardship, although he came from a landed family, and at that time landed families were suffering decline as capitalism was taking root, although under colonialism in a few parts of the economy a new class was rising, and the old aristocratic landowning class was declining. Tagore really wasn't very much into holding property or doing business. He knew that there was a role for economic matters in life, because people have to, after all, make a living. And he was genuinely interested in agricultural improvement, rural development, we will call it today. And it might interest you to know that he was the first innovator in the world of microfinance. He started it with his own money in today's Bangladesh, in the north western part of Bangladesh, and Professor Yunus did his in the southeastern part, almost diagonally the opposite part of Bangladesh, and of course since then it has grown. So he was not really this kind of otherworldly person, the typical representation that you find of gurus and other people who come from the mysterious East and then mystify the so-called West. I remember from an old hymn in a church I once went to, it went something like, "In Christ there is neither East nor West," which I think actually captures a very deep truth. After all, the world is round. What is East and what is West? We create these categories in our minds, and sometimes they become culturally fixed, and that creates a lot of difficulties in communicating across geographical and other barriers. These need not be real barriers if the spirit is there. I think that is the simplest way I can put this. And Tagore had this spirit because of the kind of family he came from. His father was a mystic and was widely read both in the mystical literature of the European variety as well as of the Middle East, especially Iranian Sufi literature, as well as the domestic Hindu and Buddhist literature. Every culture I know of actually has a deep spiritual tradition. I think it is only human, to have a spirit and to want to develop that spirit. Words do get in the way of expressing these things, because ultimately the deepest mystical experience is ineffable. You really cannot express this in words. You can point to it, of course, but you cannot really express it in words. It's not propositional, certainly. Poetry and music are probably the closest towards that, and there may be some mystical paintings. In fact, it is hard to explain all the efforts that went into European Middle Ages in creating religious art without thinking that there must have been something that really moved these people very, very deeply. And for those who actually know about art, or even without knowing, you sometimes feel that some are genuinely expressions of spiritual experience, and others are just reproductions for business purposes. Italians were very good at that, as you know. They were good at actually exporting music too to the rest of Europe at one point. Anyway. So Tagore pretty much breathed this spirituality naturally, and he connected very easily nature with spirituality and love, human love, with spirituality. So those things made it much easier for him, I think, to grow and develop. But he did go through several stages. At the beginning, his father, who was quite organized and demanding, would hold these regular musical or worship sessions, as it were, in their household, and he would ask his sons, he had quite a few sons, and sometimes his daughters too, to compose, to write and compose. So initially, the easy thing to do was to take some model that existed in the literature already in classical or semi-classical music. And he never learned music systematically, but he was exposed to a lot of classical, North Indian classical, and later South Indian classical and European classical, as well as church music. So his initial attempts are basically to take some Indian raga, and this course is on Indian music, right? Or is it? Okay.
Well, it's called Music, Dance, and Everyday Life in South Asia.
Oh, okay,
so
okay,
that's
good.
focused.
Okay, that's good. But do you all know what a rag or raga is? You know, okay.
Basically, we haven't delved in yet. Rajiv Tarna will be here.
Okay,
time,
okay,
so that time we're
okay.
ready.
Okay, so just to give you some very basic idea that it is usually a few notes, could be 4 or more, and there's a fairly definite structure of those notes, the ascending and descending structures, and then within that there are certain notes that play important roles. So I guess in abstract form, that's probably as much as one can say. But you know, for example, the major scale, right, which is one particular rag in Indian music. It's called rag Bilaval, and it's Bilaval, Bilawal, Bilaval. And so, do they know the basic scale of music?
For
Like
Hindustani music?
Hindustani
We
music.
haven't done something yet.
Okay, so maybe I'll just get them started. So this, so if you start, you can start from any pitch that you're comfortable with. So sa is the first note. Sa re ga ma pa dha ni sa. So that's the major scale, right? Okay, so and then you can descend, and that will be one rag, Bilawal. But we know that in the chromatic scale we have 12 notes, right? In the piano, right? You can go check there. Okay, we have seven white and 5 black keys in the chromatic scale. So we have those half steps also. And in North Indian music, in addition to those half steps, you have some things in between. So we'll try to listen to a few excerpts of that sort. That in between stuff is very, very important. These you can call them microtones. There is a Sanskrit word for that called shruti, which is shruti, shruti. So these microtones are also very important in rag. So when I show you some examples of Tagore's music, maybe we will be able to see that. There is one particular rag called kafi, and kafi has Gandhar, which is abbreviated as Ga, which is the third note in the scale, that is flattened, and then Nishad, which is the seventh note before you go up another octave, that also is flattened. And in every rag, as I said, you have something kind of a handle to help you with catching up, and this is called pakad, which literally means to catch, right? or something to be caught. And in Kafi, it is quite simple. It is, you start with the first one. Sa sa re re ga ga ma ma pa. So you end with the fifth one. So this song that I'm going to play for you, or ask Saraji to play for you. Let me make sure. This one is number 16. Okay. And while she's setting it up, let me tell you a little bit. It comes from an original Hindi song. He just took the structure, the melodic structure from that song. So this is from his early period. But he put actually words that are from his heart. He's talking about going around empty-handed, and he feels like he does not have anything to give. So he is truly poor, poor in spirit, that is. And he is expressing this sense of being lost and being poor and being empty, and then really asking for some way to go forward. And so it's really a very heartfelt cry of hopelessness and helplessness, and yet a kind of faint faith, you might say, that maybe something will happen. If nothing else, then just through the act of writing and singing and composing, something will happen. Let me see if you have any questions about rags or this kind of music. How much have you heard of Indian music?
Well, lots in this class. I didn't
Lots
know
in this
anything
class.
about it prior to coming into this
Okay.
class. But
Vocal or instrumental or both? Yeah, both. Okay.
We haven't spent too much time with classical music, as I mentioned. What kinds of genres have you listened to and learned about so far?
Qawwali, yeah, Qawwali is great. Bhangra, yeah. You can dance to Bhangra.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? Ghazal?
Ghazal also. Yeah. Actually, I have some ghazals there too.
Oh, good.
So, at least we know it. So, I think I said number 16, didn't I?
Yes.
Okay.
Shall we start?
Yeah, let's start. And the let me find the. I think the tal, the rhythmic structure. It's very interesting. It's actually called Shurfakta, which is a 10-beat tal, and divided into 3 parts. So it goes like 4, 2, 4. But anyway, that's not most important. But you can see that initially he was fairly traditional. He would follow the rag and the tal quite closely without challenging or questioning those things, which he would do later in his life.
So this is Rabindra Sangeet.
Rabindra Sangeet, that's right. Yeah.
Music composed by Rabindra.
This one? Okay, you will not know the words, the language. It is actually in Bengali. Yeah, you can take a look and pass it around.
And who's performing?
Actually, I'm performing.
That's what I thought. Okay.
We don't have a tabla player here, so I thought it would be better just to bring. Okay, a little lower volume. the song goes on. It has and Tagore in Qawwali actually you can see it in some Qawwalis. It's usually kind of a two-part form, A B, and then you go back to A. So what I just sang there for you, it was A B A, but there is also another part C and a fourth part D. This particular form is called Dhrupad. Dhrapad, Dhrapad, Dhrupad form, and you have also another form that is Khayal. Khayal literally means imagination. It was developed later. Khayal is Khayal. And that has only two parts. So that's really a two-part form. The first part is called Sthai. You don't have to write that down. And the second part is called Antara. Then you do a lot of embellishment and improvisation. If we have time, I'll play you one khayal, short khayal, and then you'll see the difference. Particular longing that I'm talking about. Were you able to feel some of that in the singing? Of course, part of it, how you sing also. If you yourself do not feel when you are singing, nothing of that will come. But I think in spite of cultural differences, you can feel when there is some genuine longing in somebody, whether it is for something of this world. If somebody is in love and cannot, find the beloved, that is the kind of longing that is fairly universal. And longing for finding your deeper self, which is one way of defining God. Theologians, of course, dispute these things all the time, and for people who are mystics or people who are both mystics and artists, those intellectual disputes really do not matter very much. What matters is whether you feel that in your heart. And for art, of course, what matters further is if you really can express it in a form that is adequate to that feeling. So that's another song from this period, which is about the evening slowly descending. I think anybody who really loves nature and who is really sensitive to the change of the day and change of mood that comes with the change of days must feel this, that when evening comes, right? Most people may not be able to get up that early in as students, unless there are early morning classes. but most people don't go to sleep, before evening. So evening mood is very, very interesting, I think, because something is ending, and in a more rural setting. And does anybody come from village here? No, we are all very urban. You do. Small town, okay. So you can see that there is more of a natural rhythm in the life of a small town, and certainly in a village, which is also tied to seasons. I spent about 2 months in villages in Bangladesh doing field work, singing, and and had a wonderful time. And that natural cycle is very much there in the villages. So the day is ending, you're slowing down, or you feel that you should slow down, but it's not quite time to go to bed yet. And you feel kind of a sense of otherworldliness, that there is something more in this world that you see, that you live in, that you touch and feel every day, that seems so mundane, right? There is something deeper, something more beautiful, something more calm and peaceful. This particular song that he wrote, it's also in a rag. It's called Purbi, Rag Purbi. And Rag Purbi is interesting because it has both the Komol Rekha, which is the second note flattened. By the way, there is a theory of these flat notes and sharp notes. The fourth note is sharpened. The idea is that in the morning and in the evening, when first you are waking up, and there is this kind of indistinct gradual blending of the light and of your awareness. First when you wake up from bed, at least sometimes I feel that way, that I really wished I could have slept a little more. But there is that kind of sense of not wanting to wake up and yet waking up. And in the evening, it's, as I said, slowing down, and light is gradually fading and blending. So people who are visual artists also are very much able to feel these things. And musicians in India especially became extra sensitive to these things for some reason, I don't really know. But to my knowledge of all the musical traditions that I have been exposed to, that tradition seems to have paid more attention to it. But you can find it in Western music too. So this is number 19. And so the idea is to, here the mood is much more upbeat. He has finally developed in spirit a little bit, and he's not quite as lonely and quite as full of longing and the sense that he has nothing. He is actually feeling that gradually his soul is filling up during this hour, and that he is at peace with himself. The rhythm of this is also interesting. It is 3-2-2 rhythm. Indian music has a lot of interesting rhythms that you find in Western music only in the 20th century, especially with Stravinsky. There are Stravinsky fans. I'm a great Stravinsky fan. I think he is just wonderful, especially in rhythms. But this is one of those interesting odd-numbered rhythms. In Tokyo. Musical instrument is called Israj. That's probably the recording. Okay, but you can sense that here he is much more at peace with himself, and then he actually forgets about the rags, and later he would forget about the rhythms as well, and he gives the music that comes from within himself the free play. So the next one that This is number 4. Yeah. And it is he is actually now amazed. I think anybody who really has deep mystical experience feels at least two things. One is that you feel at one with everything, that you are not really separate from the rest of the universe. And this is something, again, that has to be experienced, because no matter how many times somebody tells you that this is what you feel, unless you yourself feel it, there is no way to really convey that feeling of what it is like. Secondly, you every time you look at the creation, you are full of this wonder, really. You become like a child. I think that is one thing that is really great about mystical experience, is that you can be a child again and again and again, with the same innocence and wonder. And in this particular song, this also is, he has forgotten rag, but he hasn't forgotten tal. It also is this same tal. It's called Tagore or Rupak. There are some differences between these two, but basic structure is the same, 3-2-2. And then this he is looking at the sky at night and stars, and he is asking rhetorically to the Creator, how do you play this fairy veena? Veena is an Indian instrument. You may have seen a picture. It's a string instrument. So he's saying, oh my Lord, how do you play this fairy instrument that I can only see? And I know that in my own life you have done the same thing, that I am nothing but like a small instrument that you play, and you play and you create this feeling of sadness and also of joy. And most of all, you just give me a little bit of that divine spark of creation, the same spirit of creation that I see looking up. I also feel inside myself, and I know where it comes from. So this actually is a further stage, I think, in his development. So that's the song. Now we go to C part, which is a different melodic structure, and then D part will have the same structure as the B part. So that was one complete song, and the next one is a short one. It injects a little bit of humor if you understand Bengali. He never wants to forget his own smallness, at least in existence in human form. Tagore talks about two I's. I meaning myself. There is a small I, and there is a greater I. So the small I is what we might, in just ordinary language, what we talk about when we say the word ego, right? We don't really like people who are egoistic or egotistic, especially talk a lot about themselves. It's a sign of smallness, and in every mystical tradition you find that idea that ego is a very small thing, that perhaps we cannot do without it, when we are in human form, but it is not the greatest of things to be. And then there is a larger I, a greater I, and that I actually is, in a sense, the universal spirit. That is the part that can connect during mystical experience with everything. And each one of us, according to the mystics, really has this potential. We have this spirit, but most of the times it is hidden, and we don't even look for it. And one of the problems that Tagore found, and I find also, I have to confess, with modernity and modern life, is that it is too hectic. It is too busy, and it is too proud, you might say. Pride of science, of technology, of power, of wealth, all kinds of things that if you go back and actually read some of the sermons of Puritans in New England and Pennsylvania and those places, Pennsylvania, the Quakers especially, you find that Americans of that time were very different. Actually, they were very different in spirit from the Americans of today. Not all of them, of course. I mean, there's and there is the other great tradition in this country, the spirituality that developed under great suffering in the plantations among the African American people, and which are expressed in the great spiritual songs, which I love. There is a gentleman in Women's College, Arthur Jones, a good friend of mine. Yeah, I had him in my class actually last spring, and we sang actually some of these spirituals together, and that was a wonderful experience. So it is here also, if we only just look for it, historically as well as today, and there are people who are celebrating that greater I, or that is when we connect with one another. So he is saying here that I'm writing all these songs and I'm composing, but I'm always afraid that perhaps I will forget my own melodies. And actually he used to, because he did not write them down in notation. He would have to go to other people to help him. But he was a very good singer. He had a great voice when he was young, we are told. Unfortunately, there are no recordings except from his very old age when his voice was kind of shaky. But still, he had a very musical voice. I think must be in his 70s. I have to. So here he's saying that perhaps I will forget my own melody. Perhaps the string will break, from the vina, and perhaps the time for celebration will have passed, and I will be just sitting there without my song. So he. It's a very short song actually, so that's why I want to play it also. It's a much faster tempo, and it is there is a rhythmic structure called kaharba, which can be in 4 beats or 8 beats. So 4 beats would be very familiar, right? Because a lot of Western music is also 4/4 time, although there are many intricacies in Western music too rhythmically. And this one is in 8-beat kaharba. But it's fairly fast, and so it's easy to track. But so he's talking about this thing, which is very, in a way, humorous, and he's also afraid that during that scene of destruction, in Indian mythology, you have the great figure of Shiva, who is the Lord of music and dance and creation and destruction. So he creates and he destroys and he dances through it all. And there is this dance of destruction. It's called Tandava in Sanskrit. This Tandava Nritya, which is the dance of destruction. He says, well, if you call me, during this time of destruction, and if my rhythm does not, fit that rhythm, if they are not in rhythm, in step, in that great storm, when death comes and wants to greet me, I am afraid that I will be without a song, and that time of great party will also be lost. So he is always full of all kinds of questions. Spirituality is not something that you find once and for all, and that stays with you. I think a lot of people have this illusion, who think that they are taking the spiritual path, that somehow at some point, on a certain hour or minute or second, something will happen magically, and then everything will be just fine. It's not like that.
Smooth sailing from there.
That's right. It's not such a smooth sailing. In fact, the spiritual path is full of confusion and doubt and pain also, but also tremendous joy. So one who has taken that chance, as he says in his late points that I put in during that talk, you'll recall, that person actually also finds that ultimate joy, the ultimate bliss. Okay, so with those words of introduction, this is the track 5, next one. It's only a minute and a half. So he is still full of doubt, but he has also glimpsed, I think, the eternal in the temporal, and so he has achieved something, but not permanently. That is what I think he is trying to tell us. Now, I told you that he didn't really forsake rag, and there is a very deep song that he wrote towards the end of his life, which is a combination of several rags, which is people who will go by strict musical grammar would never do. And so he has combined Rag Bahar, which is a song about the spring, with a rag called Shahana, and also a third rag yet. Well, I can't play all of them for you, but I'll play a little bit of Bahar, and then I will play that song. And let me find where that Bahar is. Yeah, it's in this one. This is, and in this is in Khayal form. In Khayal form, you have this Thai part, one short part, and then Antra, which is the higher in higher register, and then you start with something called Alap, which is not in Tal. I only did a very short Alap in this one because it's a short Khayal. When short Khayal is more than 10 minutes long. And then you do in Alap also in Tal, and then you do what is called Tan. And Tan is when you sing the notes very quickly, and you have there are lots of technical things that happen, which is not important for us, and we are not going to go that far in this one. Although if you are interested, I can give you the CD and you can listen to it. So we'll just follow the short Alap and then Sthai and Antra part, and then we'll listen to that song by Tagore. This is the B part. that's both the parts, and then you are back to sthai, and then you have to do some alap in tal. This, by the way, called tin tal, 16 beats. When you most of the classical music in the first part is in tin tal, but sometimes you use half tal, these 10 beats. And the slow part, there is also a slow part, very, very slow. Vilambit, it's called, literally means slow. And that part is in something called ektal, which really has 12 beats, but it's stretched out so far that it seems like 48 or more. Yes. Tabla. Those are tablas. Yeah, tablas. Yeah. So tabla. Yeah, it has the two parts. The left-handed part, it can create all kinds of tones, and the right-handed part gives you a more sharp beat, but also can create different kinds of tones depending on where you hit it. So tabla is a very difficult instrument to play. Very, very difficult. Okay, so this what I wanted to show you here is here is one rag. The structure of that is very clear, and you can take the time to expand and contract and show all kinds of relationship between different melodic structures and substructures, and create a sense of kind of romantic mood and longing, usually in the spring. Spring is the time when I think in every culture I know people feel quite romantic. In Bengal, in addition to the spring, rainy season is also supposed to be romantic. That's something different, I think, from some other cultures. I think Japan is like that. I don't know so much about China, but certainly spring seems to be a universal time for love in the romantic sense. And Tagore has this song. He's using this rag plus some others, which is actually technically quite an accomplishment. By the way, he wrote throughout his entire life more than 2,000 songs, and very few of them actually repeat in the same thematic material. So he really had this amazing capacity, musical capacity to create, quite apart from his ability as a poet. So he starts his lyric by declaring that night when that very, very stormy night of despair, when the house where I was living actually itself was broken. It says literally the door fell apart. You came to me, but I didn't know that you had come. And then he creates all these images of the night, the storm, the rain, the wind, the howling sound, and you can almost call it like a ghost story, but in much more serious tone, of course. And then he says that everything became dark, and all light went out, and I did not know what it all meant. And then when I wake up in the morning, and that you are still there in the emptiness that remains, in the emptiness that remains. So ultimately, there is that paradox in Zen Buddhism, sometimes expressed as the fullness of emptiness, that our words really can only go so far without running into paradoxes. And one way to express genuine spiritual experience is to use paradox, which things just don't make sense logically.